This interview is with Carlos Alcala, Sr. Carlos is a 1973 Harvard Law School graduate. He is also my husband. My name is Norma Alcala, and I'm taking a multiculturalism class. We're actually on gender now. So Carlos is the chair of the Chicano Latino Caucus for the California Democratic Party. Carlos, I'm going to ask you a series of questions on gender. Carlos, do you think men are more intelligent than women?
No, I do not believe men are more intelligent than women. I don't think that gender has to do with intelligence.
Okay. Number two, do you think men should be paid more than women for the same
No,
job?
no, absolutely not. I believe that people should be paid depending on the job that they do and not based on their gender. I don't see why there would be a correlation there.
Okay, Carlos. Would you prefer a male doctor or a female doctor, and why?
I would not prefer either male or female doctor. I would prefer a well-trained, experienced doctor. Those would be my primary considerations.
Okay. Carlos, why do you think professional sports teams pay women less than men?
I think women are paid less than men because of the market. Market forces have more money going to men's sports than to women's sports. But I believe if they both earned that is if the sports, the franchise, whatever it is, earn the same amount of money, then men and women should be paid according to the profit that the franchise makes.
And do you think maybe, Carlos, that's because a lot of these franchises are owned by men? Do you think if eventually women are also within the higher echelon, do you think this would change?
I don't think it's I think it's market forces more than gender forces.
Okay, very good. Carlos, if a female earns more than a male, who should stay at home with the child?
The male.
Okay, very good. Do you know of any situations like that?
Actually, I do know some situations like that where the woman is making more money and the man does stay home and take care of the children because he has a lower earning capacity than the woman does.
Okay. Carlos, do you feel men are equally capable to assume the traditional homemaker role in the family?
Yes, I don't believe that the homemaker role is gender specific. It's 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 not inherent. It's something that our society has simply adopted over the years, and I think it had a lot more to do with the earning capacity. Now that we've moved into society, a society where it may not make as much difference whether you're male or female, I believe that those gender roles will begin to break down.
And as a Latino male, Carlos, I think in um, culturally, let's say cultures of color, do you think this is a much harder transition for you, for example, a Latino male or such communities? Do you think the transition's harder for them?
I don't think so. I think it's equally the same for people of color as people not of color. I think to say that it's more difficult for people of color is a cop out, an excuse not to do what's right. And doing what's right is not a matter of color.
Okay. Carlos, many of our young men, when they turn 18, have mandatory inscription. Do you think this should also be a requirement for females when they turn 18?
We don't have mandatory draft. We don't have a draft right now.
No, but they are required to sign up.
Oh yeah, they're required to sign up. Yeah, I think females should be required to sign up the same as males. I don't think that it's again the duty to defend one's country is gender specific.
Very good. Carlos, should we encourage more co-ed sports in schools?
Yes, I believe that co-ed sports are very important in the sense that we begin to break down gender roles and begin to adopt a society that views men and women equally.
Okay, very good. Carlos, should sororities and fraternities be banned as sexist, elitist anachronisms of the past?
I've always felt that should be the case. I believe that they are elitist, that they do tend to exclude some students at the benefit of other students. I don't see how education benefits from that. There may have been a time where there was a place for them in our society. I believe that time has passed and they're now an anachronism.
Yes, we've seen many sororities make national news, that is, where, hazing and even assaults of women, degradation of women have taken place. Do you believe this is because of the orientation within these fraternities?
Yes, again, I believe these are anachronistic organizations that are just a vestigial part of what used to be uh, a part of how we educated and why we educated people. We we used colleges as much as a sense as a dating service for some people as anything else, and so the sorority would fit into that model. But increasingly, that is a thing of the past. It's not necessary anymore, and the existence of these organizations and to fulfill uh, elitist expectations, in my opinion, is just no longer fits any uh, legitimate purpose.
Thank you. And our final question, Carlos. California has laws protecting trans gender students' rights to use bathrooms according to their sexual orientation. Should this policy be adopted nationally?
Yes, I believe so. I believe that transgender uh, students are need to be protected as much as all the rest of us. I mean, I expect male students and female students to be protected. Why wouldn't I expect transgender students to be protected? I also believe they ought to have services. As a society as ours, as it evolves, it has to adapt to a changing society. Um, Maybe what was good before, just male and female students, bathrooms, maybe that was good for a time when it was on. And now we have transgender students, and we have to make accommodations for them. They're people just like the rest of us, and I think we just have to make accommodations for everybody. I mean, this is not a society where we're going to say we're going to do male and female, and if you don't fit into some other category, boom, you're out. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. Why not accommodate everybody? I mean, is it something we can't do as a society, or is it something we don't want to do? I think it has to do with something that some people don't want to do because they object to transgender people. And it's not their right to object or to approve of transgender people. We don't get to make that call.
All right, thank you. And finally, Carlos, this is sort of an additional bonus because we've already got through 10 questions. But Jose Medina, Assemblymember Jose Medina of California, has a bill that's still not been signed on the governor's desk. It's on multi-ethnic studies. They took out the mandatory part, unfortunately. It would have been great, but some high schools will be able to have this curriculum in their high schools. And we know that institutional racism is prevalent, in the nation. So, do you believe that if we have the ethnic studies bill, this will help with tolerance and understanding of multicultural as well as gender appreciation?
Absolutely. I think that they say that history belongs to those that write it. I believe that history belongs to those that teach it. It doesn't matter what history is. If history is not taught from a perspective of multiculturalism, then we ought to call it something other than history. We ought to call it, if it's taught for one race, then it ought to be called that race's history. But if we're going to teach human history, then we have to approach it from the perspective of multiculturalism. The advantages of having multicultural education to me means having people learn to respect other people and to learn about the contributions of an entire society. And if we're going to have respect for each other, it's important that we start by recognizing the contributions of different people into what is our society today. If you don't have that being taught, then how else are people going to get it? Are they going to get it from rumors? Are they going to get it from what some extremist groups might say one way or the other? I don't think that's a good source. I think the source ought to be our educational system. And that ought to be how people learn their histories.
All right. Thank you so much, Carlos, for this interview. And for those listening to this video, I just wanted to also, as a little side note, mention that Carlos was actually the late labor leader Cesar Chavez attorney. Carlos worked for the United Farm Workers, won many monumental cases for them. He's also very close friends with Dolores Huerta, who's co-founder of the United Farm Workers. Thank you, Carlos.